You are the man who gave them the power to destroy themselves. And the world is not prepared.
Hey, welcome back, Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. So Christopher Nolan is back, and this time he brought a bomb.
7, 6, 5.
This movie was really heavy, and it's jam-packed with symbolism that combines philosophy, mythology, physics, and politics into a story of aspiration, fear, betrayal, and regret. And while it's a period piece taking place in the 1940s, I gotta say, I can't remember the last time a film felt so relevant. And if you didn't feel a shiver going down your spine in the final moments of the film, then you probably weren't paying attention.
Or you're psychotic.
Yeah, or that. So, J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, or as he would call himself, Death, Destroyer of Worlds.
Hey, what's that about? The destroyer of the worlds think?
Well, the full line is, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. It's a line from the Hindu scripture, the Bog-Vod Gita. In the story, Vishnu, the god of preservation, he's trying to persuade the prince to do his duty, so he takes on this multi-armed form and utters that very line. Now, the obvious part of the quote is that Oppenheimer felt responsible for the hundreds of thousands of deaths that his bomb is responsible for, as well as its potential to destroy the entire world. But I found it even more interesting that the father of the atomic bomb quotes the god of preservation. One could argue that the atomic bomb never coming into existence is the best way to preserve life on the planet. But, as we'll discuss, Oppenheimer struggled with the question if the very existence of such a bomb would be the true key to preservation, using its existence as a deterrent to itself. Now, speaking of gods, Oppenheimer is often compared to the Greek god Prometheus. The film opens with text that reads, "Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. For this, he was chained to a mountain and tortured for an eternity." This perfectly parallels how Oppenheimer gave the world the atomic bomb, setting us on a path of complete self-destruction. Prometheus was a being of great intellect, just like Oppenheimer. Now, the name Prometheus means forethinker, someone who thinks ahead. This perfectly parallels Oppenheimer's forethought regarding the death of stars, which of course led to his creation of the atomic bomb. Following the creation of the bomb, Oppenheimer had another forethought far more terrifying, his realization of how the world would use the bomb. That painted a clear picture in his mind's eye of what was to come. And when you think about the current situation we find ourselves in on what some would call the brink of World War III between multiple nuclear powers, it makes this movie all the more terrifying. When Oppenheimer is discussing with Albert Einstein the science of creating such a weapon, they talk about the possibility that the ignition could start a chain reaction that would set the atmosphere on fire, destroying all life as we know it.
Chances are near zero. Near zero.
And while that didn't happen immediately like they had discussed, Oppenheimer fears that his creation has set the world on a path of certain death, a chain reaction arms race that will lead to our mutual destruction. Now, like Prometheus, Oppenheimer was tortured by his own guilt for the rest of his life, haunted by the hundreds of thousands of lives that died via his creation, and the millions if not billions that could die from the chain reaction that he started on that early July morning in 1945. Now, I have to admit, I found the actual explosion in the testing sequence to be a little underwhelming, and we didn't even see the explosion in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For a movie that's about the atomic bomb, you might have expected a more dynamic explosion, but you soon realize that the film isn't about the detonation of the bomb, it's about the detonation of Oppenheimer himself. From the start of the film, you could say the countdown begins, and the explosion is perfectly illustrated in Oppenheimer's post-bombing speech at Los Alamos, as well as his eerie vision in the final seconds of the film. The wall begins to shake behind him, we see bright flashing lights, skin begins to peel from the faces of his colleagues. Oppenheimer is experiencing the result of his scientific achievement within his own mind as a sort of waking nightmare.
If he feels so guilty, then why do you make the bomb in the first place?
Well, Oppenheimer was a complicated guy, and this film demonstrates that perfectly. I mean, this guy was an anti-war, pro-union, communism-curious type of guy. He cared about organized labor and workers' rights. He saw the importance in caring for your fellow man and doing good for the sake of doing good.
Didn't he try to poison his professor with an apple?
Yes, that's actually true, but to be fair, he did race back to stop him from eating it. But, you know what, point taken. And look, I don't want to turn this into a dissection of J. Robert Oppenheimer's mental state. He was a real person, and I am not qualified to discuss his psychological issues, but I'd venture to bet that he had problems prior to creating the atomic bomb, problems that were severely amplified following the bombing that took place. But despite his flaws, Oppenheimer did carry a set of values that would appear to be in direct contradiction to the creation of a nuclear weapon. But he was met with a struggle that I think we all face when discussing heavy subjects like war. Are some wars necessary in order to prevent more and even bigger wars from happening? Can heinous acts be justified if they're done in the name of stopping even more heinous acts from occurring? This is a philosophical question that boils down to a basic query: what is right and wrong? How far can we go on the scale of preventative measures versus countermeasures before we see ourselves become the villain? To quote another Nolan film,
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
That quote could not be more true for a man like Oppenheimer, a good man who sought peace, and the extinction of war created a weapon that could theoretically encourage even warmongers to second-guess pulling the trigger, but a weapon that, if used, could annihilate the planet. The difference between subjective and objective is on full display in this film, and Nolan brilliantly illustrates that by having subjective parts of the story told in color, while objective parts are depicted in black and white. Now, I love this use of color. By placing the subjective parts of the story in color, it creates an imaginative atmosphere, allowing Nolan to take liberties and relay his perception of the bomb father and his life, whereas the black and white relays a feeling of stone-cold fact. It's in, well, black and white, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is showing us what really happened. So the use of color made it to where every time we jumped from color to black and white, you felt this sense of consequence come over you. You can feel the weight of the story that's transpiring in the color parts of the film. Oppenheimer was a bleeding heart. You can only imagine how troubled he was by the oppression that was taking place in Nazi Germany during the Second World War. Plus, he himself was Jewish, so Hitler's subjugation of Oppenheimer's people made the war all the more personal. Oppenheimer experienced firsthand what it meant to be thought of as less than or different. This gave him a perspective that others who perhaps shared his complexion didn't have, especially during this time in American history. What was transpiring in Germany in the 1930s and 40s was fascism in its cruelest form. Hitler was a racist, bigoted, hate-filled authoritarian who spat in the face of Oppenheimer's values. Oppenheimer knew that if Hitler were to ever come into possession of anything even remotely close to the atomic bomb, he would use it unsparingly, and the world would have never been the same. Oppenheimer's rationalization for the creation of the bomb was to create a preventative weapon that could strike fear into even the deepest, darkest soul of a Nazi. A weapon that once used would never need to be used again. Now, you could say that Oppenheimer was naive to the fact that once a genie is let out of the bottle, there's no putting it back. We even hear Louis Strauss utter this very line in the film after the revelation of his betrayal. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the true story surrounding Oppenheimer, Strauss's betrayal may have been a little surprising, but when you comb back through the film, you'll see that it's riddled with themes of perceived betrayal. Oppenheimer betrayed his field of study and used it for a weapon of war, a weapon that killed hundreds of thousands of people and could potentially kill billions more. This was also a betrayal of his values in respect to his political alignment. Many who view communism favorably, or even hold the more tamed politics of a New Deal Democrat, are very concerned with the well-being of their fellow man. But building a bomb doesn't exactly scream peace and love. But again, it all depends on your perspective regarding preemptive action, as well as weighing the needs of the many compared to the few. Another example of betrayal was Oppenheimer's love life. Now, we saw him take another man's wife, and then he later went on to betray his own son by giving him away. There's also his relationship with Jean. She felt betrayed when Oppenheimer left her for Kitty, but then he betrayed Kitty when he again slept with Jean.
What is this, Days of Our Lives?
Doug, don't joke, this is serious.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We also saw Jean, in a way, betray herself when taking her own life. Klaus Fuchs betrayed Oppenheimer and the entire country when he infiltrated Los Alamos and delivered secrets to the Soviets. I could go on. Point being, there's a betrayal in this film from the start, and it's a recurring theme throughout, all the way up to the moment that the United States itself betrayed Oppenheimer by revoking his security clearance, betraying the man who delivered them the weapon that ended World War II and cemented their victory. But the greatest betrayal was Oppenheimer's betrayal of his fellow man, from his point of view at least. And like I mentioned earlier, this film is from Oppenheimer's point of view. You could talk for hours about whether or not it was the right decision to create this bomb, but we know that Oppenheimer himself carried a great burden of guilt for what he viewed as his greatest betrayal, a betrayal of life as we know it. Like I said at the top, this film could not have come out at a more appropriate time. We're in the midst of what some would call a labor revolution, with unions going on strike for fair wages, a cause that Oppenheimer was very supportive of. But we're also experiencing a new rise in anti-Semitism, baseless Red Scare fear-mongering, a proxy war with another nuclear power, and the oppression of a certain group of people by said nuclear power. These are scary times, and you can't help but notice the parallels to our own real-world situation and that of Oppenheimer's nearly 80 years ago.
Jeez, person, this is a heavy video.
Yeah, it really is, but hey, if you're feeling kind of down after watching this video, be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you can be notified about our Barbie breakdown coming out soon. Let me know your thoughts on Oppenheimer down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.